And they say now they want to print new currency with 17 billion. So these idiots have money to print new currency, but they don't have money to pay teachers to teach their children. But there is one interesting thing about the Chinese, and when I meet the Chinese ambassador, I would like to ask him this question. Why is it that in China, the Chinese hang corrupt people? They kill them, they shoot them at a public square. But in Kenya, they are the biggest propagators of corruption. The Chinese do not care about corruption in Kenya. In fact, if you borrow money from the China Exim Bank, you decide how you want it. If you want it through a SWIFT transfer, they do a SWIFT transfer. If you want it in cash, they are ready to load it on a cargo plane and land it on JKIA in cash. I'm serious. I'm not joking. They have loaded cash before and landed it with a cargo plane at JKIA. These people, they don't care how much you steal out of the money they give you as a loan. All they care about is how much the Chinese company is making. The biggest beneficiary being a company called CRNBC, China Road and Bridge Construction Limited. This is what I mean by state capture and corruption that has been deeply entrenched in our political system and in our governance. They've stolen everything. They are now looking for creative ways to steal even what is yet to be stolen. It worries me that the IMF and the World Bank are also now, collaborators with corrupt regimes. It tends to give the vibe that probably they are not interested in an independent Africa. They are not interested in a developed Africa. They actually want to create client states, as I've read in the book, The Economic Hitman. They actually want to create poor states and client states that cannot sustain themselves so that we become subservient to their interests. That is why the IMF would loan money. It is stolen and they still loan money. The World Bank would loan money, the money is stolen, and then they would loan again more money. What can possibly explain such kind of an attitude towards Kenyan development? When they came into power, the first thing they did is that they changed the Public Finance Management Act through Parliament, and the Public Finance Management Act now allowed them to open foreign accounts abroad and receive money in them without taking it through the consolidated fund. Remember, the constitution under public finance management requires that all monies belonging to government, whether it's debt, whether it's domestically or internationally borrowed, whether it's cash receivables, whether it is tax, all of it must go to the consolidated fund. Then from the consolidated fund, it is allocated to different projects. That is how the controller of budget is able to control the use of funds and even do an annual budget implementation report. But now, to evade the safeguards that were put there by the Constitution, that is the Auditor General together with the Controller of Budget, they created something in the Public Finance Management Act which allowed them to open accounts abroad. Now we have the government of Kenya having over 50 accounts, over 100 accounts abroad that do not go to the consolidated fund. So in this particular case of Eurobond, the government borrowed $2 billion in the US from a bank called JP Morgan Chase, biggest bank in America. They borrowed $2 billion. Now, $2 billion with the current exchange rate, we are talking about 270 billion Kenya shillings. That's a colossal amount.
Oh, that's a big
When they
amount.
borrowed that money, they accounted for $1 billion. They say 650 million was to repay a debt by President Mwai Kibaki, and 350 million US dollars came to the Kenyan account. They opened this account in the name of Kenya Wealth Sovereign Fund. Now remember, we don't have a Kenya Wealth Sovereign Fund in Kenya. It's true that some countries have already established a sovereign wealth fund where they put 10% of their taxes and their mineral and the revenue that they earn from minerals. But Kenya, we don't have it. But here we have a signature of a cabinet secretary of treasury opening an account at JP Morgan Chase and receiving money in that account. They then opened another account in Qatar, also in the name of Kenya Wealth Sovereign Fund. They transferred $1 billion from JP Morgan Chase to Qatar. When it got to Qatar, it was withdrawn and it disappeared. Wow. That is theft of 130 billion Kenya shillings in one sweep, in one transaction. All right? Just recently, not so long ago, they operate the Kenyan treasury as a crime scene. They operate it like an M-Pesa. They withdrew 12.5 billion without approval of parliament, without any process, without any budget. They just did a quick supplementary budget and withdrew 12.5 billion purportedly to buy shares for the Africa Trade and Development Bank, the Africa Export-Import Bank, and Jamhuri Holdings, which is a holder of shares in Telkom. Now, Africa Trade Development Bank is unable to respond to calls and is unavailable and is non-committal on whether they receive the money. The same with Africa Exim Bank. They are evasive. They don't even want to meet the Auditor General. And of course, we never bought the shares at Telkom, meaning that is 12.5 billion stolen in one sweep. So the kind of theft that is in Kenya is colossal. It is amazing. It's something that if I tell you, it sounds like it is straight out of a movie. It makes La Casa de Papel sound like child play, like comic show. The kind of theft that is in Kenya is bigger than bank robbery. It's like walking into the Reserve Bank of America or Fort Knox and carrying away all the gold.
Wow. Morara, when I started following you, like some of the things that you were saying to me at that point appeared so explosive, and I was like, apana, I have to go and check this. And literally everything I checked was accurate. So this theft is hidden in plain sight.
Yes.
Meaning that you have documents on the website of the Auditor General. There's a trail of all these theft, and then of course we're also dealing with the Dani Airport issue right now, which needs a whole other crime scene. Which is a whole other crime scene on its own. But then the most compelling thing that you said, Morara, is the fact that now of all the revenues we collect, out of every 100 bob we collect, 80 is going towards paying debt, some of which is odious. Now, just coming back to the diaspora, when you're left only with 20 shillings to spend on everything, that means certain services that required government funds, like education, healthcare, provision of clean water, it scales back. Whether it's the county government or whether it's the national government, it scales back. And who finances that portion where the government is scaling back? People in the diaspora. I can tell you, Morara, I have expertise in finance, and I've been talking to a lot of people in the diaspora, and I'll tell you, most people in the diaspora, the money that we send back home at the very lower end is about 10% of people's income, and on the higher end, I know people who are sending up to 30% or 50% of their incomes to pay hospital bills in Kenya, to pay for education, like primary, secondary school, university education, and other services that the government is supposed to be offering. So already, our income, we already cut. We already are paying a black tax of around 30% before the U.S. federal government takes its cut.
And it's mostly education and hospital.
Yes, those are the big ones.
Those are the big ones. And not to forget also, when Morara is talking about budgeted corruption, we have like now, for example, offices. I don't know whether I'm going to call them offices or departments or whatever, like the office of the First Lady or the Prime Cabinet Secretary, whatever, getting funding to the tune of about 1 billion.
Yes.
1 billion Kenya shillings. But yet, teachers over here, capitation has not been paid. But there's an insistence on those two offices being funded.
Yeah, so let me read a couple of comments here before I come into the rest of the panel. I can see, yes, money has been coming in. And Tabitha, now I want you to start keeping a tally from everyone. From, I think, like the first person to contribute was I think, Chef, let me see, I'm missing something here.
Alex, 50 bob.
Kuna Alex
$50
yeah, so kuna Chef Wakombo was the first one to contribute. So Tabitha, and then Tabitha contributed 200. So Tabitha, keep a tally of everyone who's contributing. And then I can see Stephen JJ syndicized with $25. I can see Alex Muchugia ameskuma $50. And this is US dollars. This is not Zimbabwean dollars. Then I can see Gidraf Ganga from Pennsylvania. Nasema, I've sent $50 to MK. Guys, this young man is a true warrior. Let's give him our total support. Morara, David Kebaso, wewe ni wetu. And then Slay says, this is so sad and infuriating. Chef Wakombo bado anaongeza, amesema nimesukumia Njeri another $10. And then Slay anasema nimesukumia Tabitha Njeri $10 pia. Then I can see Nonini Mgenge True is tuned in. Nonini, unajua sasa pia amekuwa diaspora, ni moja wetu.
Na ile wimbo yake amedrop.
Na hiyo nyimbo yake amedrop, which was very good music. Anasema inject kabisa Morara. Tuko pamoja sana. And then I think Mary Kioko is asking about how to contribute. The number is +254 708 985 611. That's M-Pesa, goes directly to Morara Kebaso, and it's actually it's posted on YouTube and also pinned on the Facebook comments. I can see Washeke Nirangu here saying we should be involved in supporting this fight for accountability and good governance because the rampant corruption hurts our pocketbooks. We are forced to pay school fees and hospital bills for our loved ones at home because of the collapse of public services. A huge chunk of our income is spent on this, and this has hindered many from achieving financial stability in the diaspora, further education. So Morara, I want you to pay attention to this, because sometimes what our diaspora don't understand, like what this black tax does also to us over here. And then I have Joy KRG, and Asema, is there a way we can revisit these issues? Most people seem so interested in going after IMF, World Bank, when the vampires are right here. So we're going to be talking about the IMF and World Bank a little bit later. So good point, Joy. And then Carol is very surprised and Asema, whoa. And then Slay Odwor, my goodness. Then we have Motomoto Kitchen all the way from Delaware. That's Linda Stewart and Asema, Mayo. Then we have Lawrence Kihanya from Delaware. And Asema, now that Morara has so many receipts, and this is taxpayers' money that has been stolen in the name of projects, how can it be recovered? Can a citizen sue crooks like Moses Kuria? So Morara, weka hiyo question pembeni, utajibu baadaye. And then Nonini anasema budgeted corruption on steroids. And then I can see Sleodwara anasema it's wash kabisa. Preston Wambua, karibu sana, anasema so infuriating, makes me sick in the stomach, just ridiculous. Washeke says we can start by suing and declining to pay the odious debts as citizens, and this could make IMF, World Bank, etc. think twice about lending to Kenya. Nonini anasema unfortunately IMF likes Kenya being in that situation. They are Shylocks. Robert Bet anasema nimeongeza $50. So kwa hiyo tally, Washeke or Tabitha, please take this tally of everybody who's contributing. Robert Bet ameongeza $50. So now we are moving. And then let me see, Jidraf anasema the vampires are in bed with these two neocolonialist institutions. We need to fight both. And then Simon anasema nimesindikisha na $25. So the money keeps coming. The number is +254. This goes to Morara Kebaso's M-Pesa. Haikuji kwangu, haikuji kwa OneMicShow. It goes straight to him. And the number is +254 708 985 611. Joel KRG anasema, why not start by asking for Uhuruto to give back the money? When he was taking the loans, he had a full supercharged support of a big part of the country. Tano tena, kumera ni kumera. And then
Dhuraku.
Yeah, and then Nonini hapa anasema na seti $50 na alafu ambia Morara, I have also committed 100,000 Kenya shillings from the from the 4 millions.
Ile lawsuit.
Okay, ile lawsuit.
Yes.
Okay.
Umesikia hiyo Morara?
By the way, no nini hapo pia sisi utatuangalia baadaye hapo nyuma ya tent. Usisahau pia na sisi. And then Zala Mbogoli anasema sent $25. Thank you so much Zala Mbogoli. And then Samrak. Samrak karibu sana. Samrak hapo ameangusha $50. Tutaingia YouTube baadaye kidogo. But let's come back to the studio because what Morara has said was just, I mean, it was just super intense.
And it's a tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, it's a tip of the iceberg. Yeah, this is just a tip. And I mean, those numbers, like my mind can't even process them anymore.
Yeah.
Val.
What Morara said reminded me. Do you guys remember when we had the Anjeri scandal? The Anjeri, there was a whole oil scandal.
Yeah.
There was money that went missing from the
17
treasury.
billion, something like that.
That no one knew how does money go missing?
The oil tanker.
No.
Exactly. That made me just remember that. And just, it's so sad knowing, like, it's people, Kenyans can't even get the bare minimum, like in hospitals, getting medicine, getting maternal care, getting all these things just because money is being embezzled. That strategy of kiting, where they're moving money from Kenya to Swiss, from Swiss to Qatar, just to find a way to distribute the money so that it's not allocated.
I'm learning that term, but
I think inaitwa kiting kama
Yes.
kuna
It's kiting.
and it's just, it's sad. And having the anti-corruption we need to anti-corruption
Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission.
bure kabisa, EACC.
Yeah.
But someone asked something to do with paying the debt. Actually, Mozambique, there's something they did.
Yes, the odious debt.
The odious debt where the
Yes.
citizens of Mozambique refused to pay the odious
They
debt.
took it to court and they won. Yeah.
So that is something we as Kenyans can do.
So the owner of the debt, anakauka. Because this is debt that we did not get, so we cannot pay it. So imagine what's happening in Kenya is, imagine one day you get a statement from American Express, $20,000. A watch was bought for $20,000 and they're telling you this debt is in your name. You never even had an American Express credit card in the first place. So you can go to arbitration, and once arbitration determines that it wasn't you spend the money, American Express wanakauka na wanakula hiyo pesa. I know Mika had something to say real quick before we go to the YouTube comments and we come back to Morara. Mika.
Actually, I think me and Val have gone on the same train of thoughts about the 70 million, because it was quite funny how a lady just from nowhere decided to order oil, and she was going to sell that oil to the country for 70 billion. Then the oil was not hers. Then they didn't know who the oil belonged to, but there was a tanker with oil there. Then there was 70 billion which was withdrawn, which never went back, which disappeared somewhere. Then the next thing we saw somebody wearing $1 million watches. So, and then going back to that point of where we were saying that us who are from diaspora, in terms of black tax, how much it affects you, how much most people send a high percentage of their income. Now, the sad thing about it, Ali, is that when you send 20 to 30% of your income, and that 20 to 30%, you're paying for a service. And that service which you're paying, you don't get nearly a half of what you deserve for that service, while somebody else gets enriched with it. When we talk about education, this education mostly is high school education. It's college education that people are paying for, their relatives back home. When you're paying this money, there's still embezzlement from this learning institution that's happening. And this embezzlement goes back to the pockets of these politicians. We have this education, the university funding model that is becoming an issue right now in the country, because there is money that's supposed to come there. There's got fees that they were told to pay. These fees are you guys who are going to send that money. And then that money is still not going to help, because we are finding that the government is not releasing their shares of that money. So whatever you're sending is what's trying to cover, and this institution need to run So they will push for the students to pay their what they owe, while the government refuses this money and somebody is benefiting. So it's not only that you're covering that expense that the 20% is not failing to cover. It's also that they're eating in from your pocket. The same thing with the healthcare. They're pushing for a health system which says that people have to pay for a certain health system. The chief in itself is not even understood that it's supposed to cover people. So when your relatives go to hospital and they're not covered with that insurance, you're not going to wait. You're going to send your money, and guess what? The money that you are taking back home, there's still a hospital that is understaffed, and there are not doctors who have been paid properly because the politician was getting paid. There is no enough medication that is there because the politician who ate money for that medication. So it's not just that you are covering their extra expenses, is that you're also contributing to their pockets. So you should feel the pain of this corruption more than anybody else because you're being hurt twice.
Okay, sawa. Asante sana, Mika. Now we're shortly going to go back to Morara. Now, Morara, I'm going to read a few YouTube comments here. And as we're coming back to you, I want to think about, like how the diaspora can come in, especially there are some projects, someone mentioned the IMF and the World Bank before, because of this situation we're in where every 100 shillings, 80 shillings is going towards paying debt. We're in a situation where we now have to receive debt money to do some basic government services, and even certain projects which the government is supposed to be funding. Now you're finding foreign donors are the ones who are funding schools, water, and things that the government should be doing. So I want you to think about, like these donor-funded projects, because I heard there's also corruption in them, corruption that may not necessarily be captured in the auditor general's report. Like there's ways in which this money is also being shared out. Maybe you can talk about that a bit, but before that, a couple of people here who have been commenting on YouTube. I can see Tabs K saying, thank you, Morara, for finding time to call in. Thank you too for the civic education. Keep up with the excellent job. Praying for God to help you and your family. We have Luis Achungo, Chief Louis. We will hack into those government bloggers' gadgets and teach them something. That is what I do for a career. So someone already volunteering himself here. This is Chief Louis. This is Chief Louis' opinions. This is not the OneMicShow. This is Chief Louis volunteering himself. But Louis hapa sema, Morara, I send you $50 every week. Leo na skumia Tabitha. So someone please keep the tally pale Facebook. Chief Louis pia ametuma $50. I can see David Mathenge says karibu Gen Z revolutionary. And then George Mwangi anasema niko ndani, karibu. We can see Winnie Mwangi pia anasema karibu. Chief Louis hapa anasema thank you for mentioning Busia. I was asked to help with an app for revenue collection by the senator, but I refused because my mother said stay away from government. And then Apa Charles Mwangi anasema thanks Morara, tuned in from Houston, Texas. And then Chief Louis anasema Busia County is the only county with 2 border crossings, Malaba and Busia. Sa patrol at Seaport, ATF and border post control, immigration and a central bank branch, yet we are county 45 poor. And then I can see TCT V1 USA from Seattle Nasema Morara is a different revolutionary. No bloodshed or violent disruptions. If sending something, maximize what he receives. It is Kenya shillings 128.10 to $1 on Lemfi. So naona pia Lemfi wamejitokeza, wanasema pia wao wanatuma pesa Kenya. So for those who use that app,
wamelipa.
Well, hiyo hapo we will deal with them later on. We'll deal with them later on. And then I can see Joshua Mukolwe says, how do we tolerate all this? Pink Flamingo anasema Morara, thank you, but please be very careful. We pray for you. And then Apa Charles Moma anasema, thanks Brother Morara for what you're doing. You've made a big impact in exposing these tumbocrats. You are a warrior, brother. tuned in from North Carolina. We're going to come back to these comments because these comments are thick and fast. So we're going to come back to...
To add to that, there's Stephen Okoth. Amezindikisha na $50.
Stephen Okoth. Yeah, yes. So Tabitha Washeke, please keep this tally. Yeah, but coordinate between the two of you. We want to have a tally, at least, like of names and how many people are contributing. So that tujue ni pesa ngapi tumempa Morara, so that we know if we need to do this next time in case he has a bigger project.
Wasikue na madhafu chafu.
Okay, sawa. No, inaenda straight kwa Morara, hata kama madhafu ni chafu. He's an auditor. Yeah, he's an auditor.
Unajua uzuri hii APT Atlanta.
Yeah, hii APT Atlanta. Kama ile during Ruto's visit.
Yeah,
APT
Atlanta. Inaenda straight.
Yes, but anyway, let's go back to Morara. Back to the question that I was asking you. Now out here in the US, how can we be of help? I mean, of course, there's the few dollars that we can send out to you, but then we're here right next in the belly of the beast. The World Bank is I think 25 minutes from where we are located here. IMF about 20 minutes from here. All these entities, all these American entities that are funding projects in Kenya, we are very close to them. So talk to us, Morara. How can we be of help?
So before I talk to you about the World Bank and the IMF, I'd like to tell you that as people in the diaspora, first, I relate with your struggles. I have friends and relatives who live abroad in the US, in New Jersey, in Minneapolis, in Texas, and I know what they go through. We talk all the time. And I know how much dependence there is from Kenya to people in the diaspora to keep sending remittances. And most of it is not, we expect remittances for development. But sometimes the people in the diaspora now have to send money home for, just recurrent expenditure, pesa ya kukula tu chakula or medicine or school fees. And that is very painful. It is painful that this government and politicians in general who hold our institutions of power have created such a corrupt system where there are no opportunities for the youth, no opportunities for the rest of the population, disenfranchised them and kept them poor. But now the diaspora has to step in and keep those people alive. And the poverty in Kenya, I want to assure the people in the diaspora, it is manufactured poverty. If you look at the amount of money that is stolen every day and the kind of minerals that we have that are being mined and taken abroad without the benefit to the Kenyan people, Kenya could be one of the richest countries in Africa. It actually has the most hardworking population in Africa, but it is poor. It is poor because one person can steal money that would have benefited 13 million or 20 million or 40 million people. The kind of money that is stolen in Kenya, I will repeat again, is very, very shocking. Just the other day, the president said he has set aside 18.7 billion Kenya shillings, and that money is supposed to be spent on hiring junior secondary school teachers, who, by the way, are 56,000 of them, that he wants to hire them on a permanent and pensionable basis. As we speak today, a JSS teacher is paid 17,000 Kenya shillings. Now, with the 17,000, we expect this teacher to pay his rent, to eat food, to travel to work, to dress up, if sick, to buy medicine. And still, we have expectations that this teacher with the 17,000 and the kind of economy that we have in Kenya, that this teacher will still teach our children. That teacher is going to be the most demotivated teacher in the world. And we are entrusting this teacher with our children. At the same time, when the government promised this money, which of course it never delivered, as is the character of the president, he lies all the time. So after saying that he has no money. His minister say the government has no money. So what was he setting aside if the government has no money? At what point did he find it necessary to come on live television and give a statement and say there's money, I'm going to hire these people? Then they say now they want to print new currency with 17 billion. So these idiots have money to print new currency, but they don't have money to pay teachers to teach their children. So fast forward now to your question on IMF and World Bank. Now, I want to believe that the problems we have with IMF and World Bank is a cocktail of two issues. One, the general agenda of the World Bank and IMF. I don't believe they mean well for Kenya. But also there is the China factor, which creates a problem with the World Bank and the IMF. So let me explain it slowly so that you understand it. There is the balance of power in Kenya, that is East and the West. Now initially we were a country that were looking west. But with Kibaki and Uhuru and Ruto now, we looked east because the Chinese government was making huge investments in Africa through the Belt and Road project, doing great infrastructural projects. But there is one interesting thing about the Chinese, and when I meet the Chinese ambassador, I would like to ask him this question. Why is it that in China, the Chinese hang corrupt people? They kill them, they shoot them at a public square. But in Kenya, they are the biggest propagators of corruption. The Chinese do not care about corruption in Kenya. In fact, if you borrow money from the China Exim Bank, you decide how you want it. If you want it through a SWIFT transfer, they do a SWIFT transfer. If you want it in cash, they are ready to load it on a cargo plane and land it on JKIA in cash. I'm serious. I'm not joking. They have loaded cash before and landed it with a cargo plane at JKIA. These people, they don't care how much you steal out of the money they give you as a loan. All they care about is how much the Chinese company is making. The biggest beneficiary being a company called CRNBC, China Road and Bridge Construction Limited. If you want to know the effect of Chinese corruption in Kenya, you just look at the biggest project they've ever done, which is the Standard Gauge Railway, which of course we paid double for, and which we never got benefit for the money that we borrowed. We lost over 700 billion on that project. And you know what? The money was stolen and taken to China, then it was taken to Hong Kong. A company was registered in Hong Kong by Kenyatta. Then Kenyatta came back with that proxy company and built the expressway. Now they are telling us that the solution to Kenyan infrastructure is public-private partnership. And they are giving expressway, Nairobi Expressway, as the child, or rather as the poster child of a successful PPP. Whereas the expressway is actually money laundering. It is money stolen from public funds, taken abroad, a company registered, a Chinese front brought back into Kenya, and our money that is stolen from us laundered back. Now for the money that we pay on the expressway, for every 10 shillings, 6 shillings goes to the Kenyatta family through one of their companies. This is what I mean by state capture and corruption that has been deeply entrenched in our political system and in our governance. They've stolen everything. They are now looking for creative ways to steal even what is yet to be stolen. It worries me that the IMF and the World Bank are also now, collaborators with corrupt regimes. It tends to give the vibe that probably they are not interested in an independent Africa. They are not interested in a developed Africa. They actually want to create client states, as I've read in the book, The Economic Hitman. They actually want to create poor states and client states that cannot sustain themselves so that we become subservient to their interests. That is why the IMF would loan money. It is stolen and they still loan money. The World Bank would loan money, the money is stolen, and then they would loan again more money. What can possibly explain such kind of an attitude towards Kenyan development? I want to believe that there is complicit on their part, but I also want to understand them and say the Chinese factor has made America weaker in terms of trying to instill values of anti-corruption, because when the Americans become too strict about corruption in Kenya, the Kenyan government has an option. It has a side chick. Yeah, wakinyimwa, they go to the Chinese. So then it puts us in a situation where the Americans do not have real power to influence prudent use of resources or to prevent embezzlement of resources, because there's another kid on the block that has all the money in the world and that is ready to give it without question. So the Chinese looking east have also contributed towards the IMF and the World Bank and the Bretton Woods institutions being unable to be as strict as they used to be, or to hold government as accountable as they used to be, because now there are other options of sources of financing. So then the government does not opt for financing from IMF or World Bank if it's going to have too many conditions, or if it's going to be audited too much, because their interest is to steal this money. Where can the diaspora come in? Well, you see, in every institution, it's not everybody that is corrupt. There are actually good people in those institutions. There are good people at the World Bank. There are good people at IMF who mean well and who want a developed Africa, who want emancipation from poverty and end to disease and ignorance. So the best thing that the diaspora can do, number one, is to put pressure. And one of the ways to put pressure is to write emails, write letters, and even organize a day to occupy. We need to put our minds together and look at all the projects that IMF and World Bank have funded. Probably we can give ourselves a period of, say, 5 years and say, we want to audit all the projects that have been financed by the IMF and the World Bank in the last 5 years. And if we are not lazy, if we are able to read, most of that information is actually even available online. You can send me to the ground to go and confirm those projects, as you also confirm from online. Then we'll be able to get the correct figures. Then once we get the correct figures, we'll be able to identify which ones has money been pilfered or embezzled. That way we can have the content to write in our letters and in our emails and to occupy, or rather to protest against the IMF and World Bank. It will go a long way in terms of piling pressure on top of the leadership of the World Bank, so that if they have World Bank representatives or IMF representatives in Kenya that are busy doing corruption with William Ruto, we'll either have a replacement of those officials, or we'll have a call-in from the US, or we'll have great accountability on their part. So that is one of the things I think we can do with those Brentwood institutions. Somebody asked in the comments, what can we do? And mentioned the name of Moses Kuria and said, can citizens sue the government, or rather the politicians? Yes, indeed, I want to confirm to that person that it is true that citizens can sue. There's a provision in the Constitution that allows for private prosecution. You don't have to wait for the DPP. You can actually privately prosecute someone. But to do this, you would need evidence. And that evidence is in government books. And finding that evidence is not easy, because if they know that your intention is to bring these people to account, then they are going to conceal as much information as possible. The Moses Kuria that you mentioned is the same one that was given a tender to build a stadium in Kiambu called Karatu Stadium. So shameless was he that he even took the tender with his own company. You know, sometimes you expect thieves with conscience, where a thief, mwizi mzuri. Unajua kuna wezi hapa Nairobi wanakuibia simu, then at least they give you back your line and give you fare. They still, 10,000 or 200 bob and say, itakufikisha nyumbani.
Uingenganya.
But now we have a thief who, he didn't even have the courtesy of hiding behind a shell company or behind a proxy. He actually balloted for the tender where he is a director. Like if you go to eCitizen and pull out the CR12 of that company, you find the name Moses Kiarie Kuria. It's belligerent because he knows nothing will happen. Yani nitafanya kwani mutadu.
Yeah.
So it's the kind of belligerence and impunity that we have, you know. Sahi tunaibiwa live. Actually, they say other countries have mafia. But in Kenya, the mafia has a country. We have a criminal enterprise that owns a country.
Wow.
All right? And I've had very high-level conversations with people that I may not mention on this show, but let me just say what we discussed with them. I spoke with someone who was in one room with William Ruto and Uhuru Kenyatta not so long ago, a private room, and they were having dinner together. And this is a very powerful person in Kenya, but I'll not mention him. I had a meeting with him and I asked him, you know, we have over 6 trillion missing from our national debt. Our national debt right now is 10.4 trillion. We have 6.7 trillion that is completely unaccounted for, never came to the Kenyan people, cannot be directed to any development project. It's just odious, it's gone. Where is this money? Because I don't see it in the economy. 6.5 trillion, that is about $48 billion. That's about $50 billion. If it was in Kenyan economy, I would be seeing it. Kenya would be looking like Dubai. It would be having things like Burj Khalifa. But I don't see it in Kenya. So I was asking him, where is the money? Are these people buying properties abroad? What are they buying? He told me, well, it's true that they buy properties abroad, but the truth is most of this money is in cash and it is in dollars. And it is stashed abroad. Some in Panama, some in Cyprus, some of the money in Virgin Islands, some of the money in Malta, and some of the money in London, and some of the money in Dubai. For Dubai and London, most is this purchase of assets. For the rest of the country is cash. This money is also kept in Hong Kong, in different accounts, in proxy accounts. Why are they keeping the money in cash? I asked him. And he told me the mission is simple. These people have a dream. They want to be like Vanderbilt. They want to be like JP Morgan. They want to be like the Rothschilds. So the mission is simple. Make Kenya as poor as possible, then take the money you've stashed abroad, buy everything and make Kenyans your slaves. Control all sectors of the industry, own the means of production, then make Kenya an empire where you just pass down power from your son to your son to your daughter to your son. And by they come to think of it, it looks like conspiracy theory, but it actually makes sense. It looks like a nightmare, or like a dream, or some wishful thinking. It doesn't look realistic. It looks like, you know, it's an imagination, but it's real. These people actually are on a deliberate mission to collapse the country. Because we have a president who has a PhD, so by all standards, he's not stupid. But he has a PhD in theft. So the question I asked when I was on Jeff K. Nenge Live is, once you become a president, why do you need to steal? Once you've become a president, that is the highest you can be. Why do you still need to steal? And now it's making sense. You steal because you want to create an empire where you own the means of production, you own a whole banking sector, or you own the whole railroads, or you own airports, or you own the ports, or you own all the land, or a substantial amount of the land.
Wow.
So that now the country cannot move without you. The country is now your personal property. You have so much influence. You are like the royal family in London. You have so much influence, nothing can move without you. Not even rats can eat anything unless you've given them the permission.
Oh,
so
my
that
goodness.
is the mission of these people, to own sectors of the economy. They want to do it the way it happened in the USSR in the fall of the Soviet Union. When the Soviet Union fell and we had the new Russia, we had the Russian oligarchs like Roman Ibrahimovic and this guy called Vladimir Ibrahimovic Putin, who bought everything because they are the ones who had the money.
Wow.
Right? They bought, you come and buy Kenya pipeline at 200,000 Kenya shillings. Or you come and buy Kenya Ports Authority at 100,000 shillings. Or you come and buy, the airport, Kenya JKIA, you buy it at 10 million Kenya shillings. So I believe that is the mission. And if we don't stop it, I want to assure you, the people of the diaspora, that this place called Kenya that you call home will no longer exist. Wow. It will be some slave land run by, people like Haiti gangs. It will be run by people like Barbecue, where people actually control the country and there's nothing you can do about it.
Wow. I mean, this is so profound. And I